Welcome to NDM English. I am Nate, and this discussion will focus on the third section called The Second of the Three Spirits, from A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. A ghost will show Scrooge what life is like during Christmas when he isn't participating. He is shown a day filled with hustle and bustle of business and visitations, as people buy food and gather to enjoy time with family and friends. None of this will Scrooge be a part of, but that doesn't mean he is absent. Those who know him well enough will talk negatively or with some sorrow about his sad existence. Others will try and forget about him completely because his actions and his attitude has caused them to be poor and in some kind of a grief. Waiting for the next ghost, Scrooge thought he was ready for whatever would enter his room. He was up and aware, looking at the clock's time to chime in on the appointed hour. Surprisingly, there was no ghost to be seen when the time arrived, and that made him very nervous. He began to question why no ghosts have come, having decided with the conclusion that after the first one, there really would be another visit. What he did finally notice was a light that entered his room. For some reason, he didn't notice it at first, and the narrator assures that only Scrooge can know why he didn't notice it. Why there was a light that was a mystery to him, and what he was to do next. Perhaps it was because Scrooge finally felt prepared and in control of his situation that he didn't notice the light, or know what he was going to do once he did. Knowing generally what could come and how he would respond was a comfort to him. Now with the light, he wasn't sure how to react. He didn't know the meaning of it, and this once again put him off guard. For someone like Scrooge, who loved to be in control, and even from his finances to how much coal to allow in to his office to warm things up, he always knew what to do and how to act. Not knowing how to act was very concerning for him. Finally, after thinking on what action to take, he got out of the comfort of his bed and headed to the light. He was at the door and ready to unlock the room that had the light when his name was called out and offered to enter. Inside the room was a giant sitting on a throne made of meat, fruits, and vegetables. The ghost held its hand a cornucopia of plenty that acted as a torch. Much more can and will be said about this apparition, but considering it will later become a representation of heavenly happiness, it should not be surprising that Scrooge had to seek it out. Although happiness can exist for a number of reasons, most times love and joy must be looked for and cultivated. The light must be noticed and then a decision made to approach it and have a more positive attitude about life. No one needed to find this light more than Scrooge at this time. There's very well the possibility that Scrooge could have ignored the light and went back to sleep. The lessons necessary for a full change in the man would have then been missed. How much he would have changed enough to become the charitable Scrooge that he becomes at the end. Already a change has been made in Scrooge's heart because of the visit of the ghost of Christmas past. He was much more humbled at the sight of this large and food-surrounded ghost than he did Marley or the other one. Knowing the purpose for the ghost's presence in his house, he even requests, "Conduct me where you will," to start learning the lessons about to be taught him. Immediately the ghost told him to hold on to the robe, and the small journey of discovery began. Of the three ghosts, the one for the present is the most religiously representative, with the power to enlighten and bring happiness to even the darkest corners of the world. Yet it is very clear that the ghost is not God or a manifestation of a divine personage. When first introduced to Scrooge, the ghost asks if he had ever seen anything like itself before. Scrooge said he had not. When the ghost pushes the issue, it is mentioned that other, older brothers existed that could have been noticed. Again, Scrooge said he had never noticed any others. There is some mention that the ghost is very young, and there are more than 1,800 brothers born before him, and this more than hints that the ghost represents some form of a year. This is because the book itself was written in the mid-1800s, which represents by that at least that many have passed on. But this ghost only exists in the present. There's the temptation to think of it as Father Time, where the year comes in as a baby and goes out as an old man. But there are too many differences between them for this to actually represent the year. The spirit is more of a representation of a very short amount of time. It is later revealed that the ghost or spirit has a very short life, because Scrooge notices that the ghost becomes much older. He is told by the ghost that by midnight of Christmas that he would no longer exist. So the ghost of Christmas Present is not the Father Time where it's one full year of going from a baby to an old man. This spirit is actually the very spirit of Christmas, which only lasts from the season when it starts to when Christmas ends. What it does during this short existence is bring a season of joy to those who are even among the poorest of conditions. That is, like Scrooge by going toward the light, if they are willing to let the Spirit enter into their lives. Now there's no other boundary of who, when, or where throughout the world this joy and happiness can be spread. Examples of this include visiting of prisons, lighthouses, seagoing ships, and even the mention of foreign lands. Wherever people are open enough to receive the light, the ghost will give them a blessing. This is, of course, similar to the light of Christmas season, which is a holy time of year. This is the light of Christ, if you will, spreading itself all across the land. Again, this is the most religious of the ghosts that are going to visit Scrooge during what supposedly is one night. Now, happiness can be expressed by the most humble of people, including a poor family and a crippled boy. This is, of course, referring to Bob Cratchit's family and their young son, Tiny Tim. The whole family gathers around the home fire and is amazed by the meager food preparations for Christmas dinner. A small turkey with a few extra side dishes brings them happiness and emotional warmth. Most amazing of all is the pudding, especially prepared for the dessert. All of this is both unusual for the typical meal and a meager amount of the rather large yet poor family to eat. There's an interesting contrast between the family sitting next to the fire eating this humble bounty and Scrooge the previous night with his gruel. The Cratchit family has a warm fire and good food. More importantly, they have each other for no matter what the worrisome circumstances they might have towards money and health. The crippled boy, Tiny Tim, that catches Scrooge's attention and the reader's imagination, even exclaims the now famous, "God bless us, every one," and means it. The ghost warns this pleasant boy will be dead if nothing is done soon, and it touches the previously miserly greedy man's heart. He begs that the boy will not die, only to have an earlier statement about starvation getting rid of the surplus population thrown back at Scrooge. He has changed considerably since those words were spoken. Standing near a spirit that freely gives joy and magically spreads happiness most likely helps Scrooge have an uplifting and celebratory attitude during the whole trip. For the first time, the crack of change to a warm heart since the visit of the ghost of Christmas past is now wide open. Scrooge is shown a party that his nephew is having and witnesses the fun and games. Earlier, the nephew invited Scrooge to attend, but was turned down with the usual dismissal of Christmas as a bunch of bunk and not very deserving of actually existing. Now, after witnessing music he remembered as a child, watching young love slowly developing, and a type of guessing game played by everyone, Scrooge joins in the merriment. He seemed to have forgotten that he wasn't actually there and was only an observer. That wasn't, at least at the moment, really happening. It didn't matter because Scrooge sometimes came out with his guess quite loud and very often guesses right too, even if no one was going to hear him. Now there are a couple ways to look at time during this vision of Christmas celebrations. After all, this is supposed to be the ghost of Christmas present, meaning at current time. One possibility is that what Scrooge is witnessing very much is happening. People are going about the day of Christmas and enjoying the celebrations, while Scrooge looks on as an invisible spirit. Supposedly, these scenes are what would be happening outside of Scrooge's view on Christmas Day. Later, by the end of the ghost visit, time would go backward, and Scrooge actively become part of that time loop. This would literally be the present time moving forward without the interference of the spirits. Another way of looking at it is that these are, as Scrooge himself considers, visions of what the next day will be like. They might be exact or nearly exact approximations of how the day will progress. Now, calling the spirit the ghost of Christmas present would not be a literal description. The name is only relative to the time differences between the years gone by in the past and the ones that will be soon shown when the next ghost appears. Scrooge was not unaware of this time sleight of hand, as he questions how long the night was, since so much was shown him during what could only have been one night. It wasn't the first or the last time he thought of this time fluctuation. Throughout this night of joy and celebration, not all was a perfect happiness. Despite the enjoyment Scrooge had watched with the party, there was an undertone of a dislike for him among the party-goers. His name was invoked first by the nephew, who laughed at how his uncle behaved. A guest commented that Scrooge, considering Christmas a humbug, was a disgrace, as was the man behind the word. The nephew returns her opinion by calling him comical, and his wealth of no use to him either personally or to gain physical comfort. He neither uses it for himself or others. Money is only hoarded for money's sake, having no goal in mind for its earning other than to earn more. To make matters worse, he has no friends or family to share it with, and certainly doesn't intend to save it for others. He glories and worships wealth, but lives in poverty of heart and body. He doesn't have any comforts. He doesn't have any friends. All he has is the wealth that he doesn't use. It is a terrible existence. More unhappiness is revealed to Scrooge by the ghost of Christmas present when he is shown a depressing boy and girl. Scrooge notices something underneath the clothing of this Christmas present ghost and comments on it. What he finds is ugly, twisted, animal-like pair of boy and girl that are hard to look at. They have the form of children, but look much older and depraved. Scrooge asks if they are the ghost's children, but is quickly told they belong to man. It is explained that one of them is ignorance and the other poverty. Both go together, and although hidden under the robes of the joyful spirit, their existence is always there, created by man, and remembered each year only sparingly. Feeling charity for the unfortunate ones again, Scrooge asks if anything can be done for them, or if they have a place to live. As before, the ghost mocks Scrooge by referencing an earlier quote about prisons and workhouses as places for the poor. With those last words, the clock strikes 12, and the ghost of Christmas present disappears. In its place will stand the final ghost, a most frightening specter that is the very opposite of joy and celebration. Death will be at Scrooge's bedchamber. Click the subscribe button and notification bell to not miss the next installments and analysis.